Yo, what up everybody, Revenov here again today with another piece for you. Although this time, and funnily enough, it is another birthday present. It's just for my little bro, Maddie. Happy birthday, kiddo. You are already old. Old is all I can say. I'd rather keep the privacies of age at bay regardless, be it man or woman or whatever it is that you would want to be. So I thought about this piece for a bit. I looked through a few photos, trying to pick out something that best represented how I felt about his growing up. And I also had to try and weigh out what was within my artistic abilities, of course, to execute from those reference photos. And I found one in particular. I wanted to show something specifically about him going out into a bigger world. I wanted to draw some inspirations from just the big outside world of Zelda, how it's always been since growing up with that game in mind. It was one of the games that Matt and I really loved to play, and we played it all day, regardless if it's just a one-player kind of a game. We had fun because we'd sit next to each other and then egg each other on about where to go next and what to do, and the bosses that we fought but were too afraid to fight, if you know what I mean. I was more of a spectator of games than anything, which is why when it came to actually playing Zelda, it was a little bit difficult because I'd always be afraid to actually fight enemies, and eventually Matt ended up taking the wheel at some point. Besides that, I'm actually going to talk a little bit about the piece because I realized last time I kind of went off on a tangent, just blabbering on my life stories. So one thing I found interesting about this, and I also realized it too, because I don't do landscape work. I don't do backgrounds. I legit just draw a bunch of people more than half the time doing things or interacting, which is fine, okay? For a lot of artists, it's what they become good at and they're able to make something out of it. But something about doing these pieces with a full background, with full color and all that, I actually had a lot of fun because I learned a bit about exploration and applying how to properly study from references. Now, the original photo that I used as a basis had a lot of ripples and patterns on the rocks, and you can see my indecision. I spent a lot of time on the rocks alone. And I ended up realizing as well, the further that I went, it doesn't have to follow the photo to the T. I remembered that references are meant to be references, not necessarily copied. So with that in mind, I ended up going for this kind of half smooth, half rocky finish or texture on the rocks. Art technicalities aside, let's go back to my little bro. My gosh, if I'm gonna talk about him, just like I would any part of my family, I'd have too many stories to tell. So I might as well get talking. Aside from the fact that I was kind of like a bit of a shit older sister, abusing their older sibling rights. And the funny thing is, a lot of the stories that I've been told about me abusing the heck out of my little brother, I can't remember for the life of me. I honestly can't. But sometimes, if there are instances when I do kind of feel bad, just because I'm like, wow, I didn't know I was that much of an ass to my kid sibling. Older sibling rights. I'm sorry for all you younger kids out there, last born kids. I don't know what it is. It's just this sense of authority that's bestowed amongst the older sibling. I don't know what goes into that, if it's a psychological thing or what, you tell me. Yeah, there was a little bit of that. One of the most fun things that I had in hanging out with my little brother was, of course, there's always going to be the games and the imagination, the little world that you grew up in, exploring together with your sibling. I had this thing going for the both of us. Like, I don't remember at what point it happened. This was something that I did alongside my best friend. So what would happen was, I think it was like shortly after we played freaking Naruto Shippuden or something, much later in our lives, when we got the luxury of actually borrowing somebody's, I think it was a PlayStation 2. I don't remember what console it came out on. But yeah, we played Naruto Shippuden. Slowly after that, we started to really get into, what it would be like if we actually met these people, right? And we would actually make up our imaginary world playing those scenarios out. More than half the time, he wanted to just sit next to me and listen to me create this entire scenario, this entire story, and he would just sit there and listen. Matt called that the story. And so every time you wanted to hear me talk about it, he'd always be like, Sats, can you do the story? And I'm like, okay. It was fun. Okay, don't get me wrong, it was fun. It's just, it got tiring at some point, trying to act out 20 plus characters, him included. If you do it years on end. Yes, this went on for years, by the way. And another funny thing behind that was, so I'd be sleeping in my bed in one side of the room, and he'd be like asking me if I could tell the story, and then I would. But then my mom and dad would like catch us because I have to speak loudly because he's across the room. And so one of the things he did a lot was crawl out of bed to the end of my bed and just lie down on the floor until I get like too sleepy to continue, and he'd crawl back to his own bed and sleep. It's so bad. But I guess we were kind of inseparable in that way. Just talking and talking, or him just wanting to hear what I have to say, or the kind of stories that I'd create. And I think we were very upset when my mom decided to move Matt to the other room. We kind of hated it because I wanted to be with my little brother, but at the same time, I was also kind of scared to sleep in the room by myself, and so was he. And I think for the first couple of nights, we kind of just bit our lip and dealt with it. But then later on, when we found out the specific hours that our parents would be too busy to check up on us, or they'd be, resigned to their bedroom. Either he or I would sneak out and then go to our siblings' room and then just tell the story, or, joke about stuff or play and everything. And then we'll get in trouble, but it's fine. I think at some point my mom kind of scolded us because she found out about it. Of course they would. But she kind of gave up as well, and then Matt ended up moving back into my room, and that just meant joys for us, and we do that all over again. There was one time I felt so horrible, Matt. I don't know if you remember this, but I whacked him with a pillow once during a pillow fight, and he flew and he hit his head on the bloody wall. I felt so bad, partially because I could have really seriously injured him. Another thing was also because I didn't want to get in trouble. Isn't that always the case with older siblings? It's really just because you don't want your mom and dad to go belting you for mistreating your younger sibling by accident, or whatever the case may be. Don't worry, guys. The wall was hollow and it was made of wood. Not like that's any better, but But yeah, Matt, if you remember that, I apologize. I'm trying to be a good sister now. I remember the very first time that I came across quote-unquote adult videos on my parents' PC. I think my parents went out to the groceries that day, and I was scrolling through a bunch of stuff from a relative's hard drive, and I found the video. And I had a jaw-dropping moment. I don't remember how old I was. I was young. That's all I remember. But the funny thing was, after that, I ran out to the living room and I was like, Matt, you gotta come look what I found. And obviously, he was in the middle of a game, so he didn't want to leave. Then I had to bug him and I had to really say, dude, it's... And then I told him it was those videos. But it's kind of funny because he looked at it for a second. I don't remember much of his reaction. I just remember the hype of me actually egging him to come and look at the video with me. I think he was astounded for a while. But then afterwards, he kind of just went out to play bloody PC games again. I remember when my parents would be out of the house and it would just be him and I, especially during the evening. And on those days, Matt and I would be very like scared. I think one time he heard something outside of our house, and I always used to think that we could get robbed at any moment, because that's exactly what was taught to us. It could happen because it has happened, and we thought that it would happen on the day where our parents wouldn't be around. And rascals, by the way, is what we call these guys back in where I'm from. They're, I don't know, for a lot of people it has less of an impact, but you just call them burglars or, I don't know, robbers. But the thing is, with rascals, they are that, but they can also do a lot of physical harm as well to anybody. So that's what we call them, rascals. And when Matt and I were alone, he would always be afraid of there being rascals. So I think at one time he heard rustling outside our house, and I think I was preoccupied watching the telly, and he came in and, you know, he pulled on my arm and he said he's scared. So I couldn't find the baseball bats that my mom had in the house. So I ended up running all the way through to the living room with Matt behind me, and I gave him a frying pan. And I remembered turning out the lights, closing the curtains, and I stood behind the big front door. I told Matt to wait in the bedroom, or at least in the bathroom, because the bathroom was closest to the living room, and if he had to come out and help me, he could do that. And we sat there for a really long time, and nothing ever happened, and we got bored. We got bored, and eventually I came over and I just told him, you know, look, let's just watch TV in the living room, and then if something really does happen, let's go back to our designated positions. And that was it. I remember that time where he shot me in the eye with a Lego, and I got very upset. And those arguments that we would have, to which I would make him cry, and then I'd, you know, constantly try to tell him, no, it's okay, you know, shh, be quiet, it's fine. Just so my parents wouldn't hear. And I find these scenarios to be very surprising, that you can build this closeness with your sibling, but hate them at the same time, but love them all the same. And it came a lot to, you know, finishing each other's sentences, just knowing the kind of tastes that we have in music, and what moments in games we would find funny, what we would joke about. I remember one time my mom telling me that my dad had that similar relationship with his sister, and when she finally got married and moved to another country, my dad cried a lot, and she said that Matt and I had a similar closeness too. I think she used this on us because she was trying to get us to sleep in different rooms, like I mentioned in the beginning of the video. And she said, Matt, you know, Shine, you're gonna have to learn to like separate from each other at one point and become a little more independent from each other, because you're not gonna be with each other forever, you know. And your sister, like, she looked at Matt specifically and she said, your sister, you know, finds a husband or something, she's gonna leave you. And Matt looked so horrible and I felt horrible, but we couldn't deny the truth as well. And I think after that we kind of just hugged each other and I cried for a while. I mean, I eventually had to agree with my mom because she was technically right, but it didn't mean that we were gonna stop talking to each other or trying to hang out with each other to the fullest. And I think we were like, I don't know, taking a bath with each other until, oh man, I don't know what grade we were at, but I was like pretty old until I started to realize things myself, that I was starting to get older. And then I had to tell Matt, you know, kiddo, this is gonna be like the last time that I take a bath with you with the Legos. And we were sad, but you know, you get older, you grow, you get new body parts. Well, not really new body parts, but you know what I mean, extended body parts. Whether that may be enlargement of certain areas, I won't delve into that. But yeah, we were that level of close, Matt and I. We would just know. As we got older, Matt started to get a little more distracted with games and stuff, and I started emoing. I didn't do the mascara thing, okay? Disclaimer putting out there. I didn't do any of that. One, only because I had skin allergies. Two, mascara is expensive. Makeup was expensive. 3, I did not like the prospect of anything on my face at the time. But I was one of those people who constantly contemplated about the philosophies of life. Why did we live? What is the reason for living? All those strange things that come in between. And I think when I was going through that phase, I was busy watching TV. Which is fine. You know, I don't want him to get sucked up in this too. And I think he's gone through that phase as well at some point. There was one thing very strange though, growing up. Starting to realize the differences we both had. Let me be more specific. So, when we came to the Philippines, finally, and I started chatting with my 2 older brothers more, and I realized that a lot of my tastes followed the same suit that theirs did. And I wondered why Matt wasn't catching on like he used to, because whatever I liked, he would just naturally like as well. And I was getting a little worried, because I didn't want him to be an outcast or anything. I don't know why I thought that at the time. When I brought it up with my older brother, he said, if anything, it's a good thing. It means that Matt has the potential to perhaps view life in a way that we didn't. Maybe it could be advantageous for him. And as much as I didn't like that idea, I also thought it was good. I had a thing where I did a lot of crazy things that made me look like the weirdest kid in class. Looking back on it, I probably was the weirdest kid in class. But my brothers ended up questioning me about it. I told them it was because it felt that it made me different. And apparently they felt that way as well when they were growing up. So I embraced that particularly, which is why it made me worried, because if Matt wasn't like that, it could potentially mean that he'd be like everyone else. And I wanted him to be just as special. But after my older brother ended up telling me that, I also decided, yeah, it's a good thing for him to take on his own life and his own decisions and age his own way. And this conversation happened many, many years ago. Matt's changed as well since that time. A lot of big, significant things have also happened in between, which has changed him too. Now I just think about how he's on his way slowly now to really being independent for himself. I'm starting to see that a lot of the things that I ended up experiencing back then are also now happening to him too. Not in the same way, in his own way. Just like how it was meant to be. But I appreciate the small things. Like, in the end, he did end up having a bit of a passion for rock and metal, just like I did and my older brothers did. He views certain things as well, the way I do and the way my older brothers do, what all with keeping his own individuality, which is, at the end of the day, the whole point, right? The whole point of him growing up. Not to take on the shadows of his siblings, but to be who he wants to be. And I'm really glad that he's also found good supporting chains along the way, whether that be friends, terrible experiences which have made him wiser, heartbreak, and love. I've separated from that roof that he and I were under for a long time now. It suddenly feels like years. Actually, it has been years, so I don't know what the hell I'm talking about there. But sometimes there is still this closeness. Here's the funny thing though. The whole, when she separates and finds her husband, blah, blah, blah. You're gonna end up feeling really hurt and sad. And I think Matt did for a while, and I felt bad too. But who wouldn't? At the end of the day, we kind of got over it pretty much quickly. She still kind of hang out. But Matt makes it evident. He still wants to hang out with me and stuff. I'm guilty. I live in my own world half the time. It's been that way with him too. And that's why we don't always just talk. And people always come to me saying, well, why don't you just message or give him a call or something? And he'll tell you the exact same thing that I'm going to tell you right now. It's not the same. I guess it's just because we grew up that way. Building relationships and very strong connections through a one-on-one conversation is just how we always grew up. Talking to people directly, giving that eye contact, sharing experiences. So it feels really awkward for the both of us to just try and chat over the line and not see each other and not express how we feel or put in our hand gestures or make funny faces when we speak. So if we wanted to really talk, if we wanted to hang out, it would have to be in person. At the same time, we're too lazy to go and leave our households. I guess that's the problem with the both of us. We're just so introverted, so in our own space, and time again my parents have scolded us for that. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm sorry, Dad. Time and time again our own significant others have done that, and we only found out when I was telling those kind of stories about my significant other getting on my case about me not delegating enough time into a relationship. I'm guilty, okay? I'm really guilty there. It's still something I'm trying to work on. And apparently, Matt's significant other also complains about the same thing. And we really realized from there we truly are siblings to the bitter bone. Did you know, despite any of that, I really wouldn't have it any other way. And I'm really glad that I had a hand in his growth in all the good and bad ways. And I'm just happy I could call him my brother. So here you go, Matt. But you're not the girl, by the way, with the blue eyes. Don't worry about it. I just, yeah, I can't draw guys yet. So, yes, it's a girl. And I gave her blue eyes because, you know, it looks vibrant and it stands out. You're about to leave that weird little cave of yours and start adventuring just like you're supposed to. Or you can stay in there. It's up to you, man. What the fuck? I don't know. You do you. Whatever the case may be, kiddo, just like we tell each other all the time, we'll still be there to understand each other and be there in support whenever, wherever. Revenov,